Welcome back to this video series of C++ programming. This is the lecture 21 of this video series, and today we are going to talk about operator overloading in C++. Operator overloading feature in C++ allows you to use the certain operators as per your application or as per your purpose. Let's talk some of the important point of operator overloading. First, in C++ you can overload most operators so that they perform special operations related to classes and objects that you create. That means the operator overloading is basically related to the classes and the objects that you create in your program. For example, if there is an operator which performs addition, so plus is a one arithmetic operator, but this operator you can reuse for the different purpose or rather the same purpose, but it can happen related to the classes or objects. So if you want to add the, the two objects, then this plus operator can be used accordingly. Typically this plus operator adds two variables, but now as per your need you can add the two objects or the content of two objects directly using that plus operator when you overload it. This is the syntax of operator member operator function. So operator overloading happens in terms of a function. Now this is the return type. So similar to any other function, you have to specify the return type, then the class name. If you are defining this operator member function outside the class, membership label, and then very important is this operator keyword. So this is a standard C++ keyword. So you have to specify this operator keyword when you are overloading the operator, and then hash sign indicates the specific operator. So it can be plus, minus, increment, decrement, or any other operator. And then you specify the argument list, and then rest of this things is similar to the function. So this is how member operator function is defined. We'll see some of the examples of operator overloading function. We'll see this four different operators: plus, minus, this plus plus, that is increment, and this is decrement operator. So we'll overload all these four operators, and we'll see this how they work with the overloading. So we'll take the example of GPS location operations to illustrate this overloading of the operator. So let's begin. Here first we'll create one class and we'll call this as a location. And now inside this class we'll create two private members. One is call this as a longitude, and second as a latitude. So these two variables determines the GPS position. So the GPS position is determined in terms of longitude and latitude. And we'll create some public member functions. We'll write those member functions later on. So here we'll create an object of this class, and we'll call this as L1, or we'll call this as a GPS1. And here we'll create a constructor for this GPS1. So we want to create a constructor that can take a parameter. So we want to specify some default parameters that will initialize this to variables longitude and latitude. We'll pass some parameters, say 10.34 and 2.56 for an example. And since this is now since we are initializing this object here, we have to use the parameter as constructor. So you know how to create the parameter as constructor. The name should be name of that class. And now inside this, create two variables. One is for getting the value of longitude and another getting the value of latitude. And now we'll store this uh, these two values, past values, into these two member variables. I'll create another object and we'll call this as a GPS2, and here also we'll specify some parameters. What we want to do is we want to add the longitude and the latitude of these two objects, that is GPS1 and GPS2. So how to add this two objects? For that purpose we'll use the plus as an overload operator. We first write the function and then we'll understand how this function works. We'll specify the return type as a class name, and then so as we talked, when you're writing the any overloaded operator member function, you have to specify this operator keyword and then followed with the name of that operator. In this case, this is the plus operator or the additional operator, and then the arguments. Now here we are returning, basically when you overload the operator, we expect the return type as the class name. So we'll be returning the object from this function, and the arguments you need to pass the objects. So let me first call this function here. So we'll get uh, the result of the addition in this GPS1 object, and we'll add this to GPS1 and GPS2 objects. So this is what we want to achieve. So we want to add this GPS1 and the GPS2 object directly. But now, since by the normal function you cannot, or by the normal statement, I mean without this overload operator function, we cannot write this statement because you cannot add the objects directly. This is not a variable, this is this object, and this direct object addition is not allowed, or it cannot be happened in this C++ program. For that purpose we are using this operator overloading functions. So this writing this statement is similar to writing this statement. So this now operator 1 operator plus function. Now this operator plus is the name of a function, and this function belongs to this GPS1 object. So this is a member of this GPS1 object, or it is called for this GPS1 object. And then inside this we're passing GPS2 object as an argument. Here when you are doing this, we have to specify here argument as a, say we'll call this as a object, but this object will be now GPS2. So this is very important point, how this function is expanded in C++ programming. So when you add GPS1 plus GPS2, that means we are calling the operator function, which is now for a member of this GPS1, and then we are passing the argument as a GPS2 object, or the second argument, which is on the right side of this plus operator, and we are collecting the result into this GPS1 object. So since we are getting the result into this GPS1 object, we must specify the return type as the class name. Alright, so we saw how this is expanded. Now inside this function, we know now this function uh, is called for the GPS1 member, or the first object. Then you can directly, if you directly access this two variables longitude and latitude, now they will be accessed for this GPS1 object. So while adding the two uh, member variables, so first let's create some uh, temporary object here, call this as temp, and now we'll add this, get the latitude value, and now this will be the addition of the latitude value of these two objects, GPS1 and GPS2. As we know, the first value is, we can directly use this member variable name, and now this belongs to this GPS1 object because this member function is called for GPS1 object. and this second latitude value will be taken for this second object using this past object parameter. Alright, so this is how the latitude will be added. Similarly, we will add the longitude value, and then we'll return this temporary object. The return object is then collected into this GPS1 object in this main function. So the content of this object is then copied into this GPS1 object. Now this is this plus addition of this two objects is performed, or the members addition of the members in this two object is performed. Now let's write another function here. Call this as a show. So this will display the values of this longitude and latitude member variables. Alright, so now let's call this function here for the GPS1 object and for GPS2 object as well. Now this first will display the value of longitude and latitude for the GPS1 and object, and this one display for the GPS2 object. And let's add these two functions, or let's declare the prototype for these two functions inside this class. Another thing that we need to take care is, now this we are calling this, we are initializing this object here, and for that purpose we have created this parameterized constructor. But inside this operator overloaded function, we have created the another object of the same class, but we are not initializing these objects, we are not passing any parameters, and that's the reason we need to overload the constructor. So we need to create another function, another constructor, which won't take any parameters, and now this will become parameterless constructor. Alright, now let's compile the program and let's see whether we're getting any error or not. Okay, now run the program. Here you can see it is outputting the values. First longitude as a 22.68 and latitude as a 63.12. And next time these two values of longitude are for GPS2 and these are for the GPS1. Now let's analyze the result here. But the first result, we're actually adding the GPS1 and the GPS2 objects, or the members of the GPS1 and GPS2, and then storing into the GPS1. So that's why it is showing the result as the addition of these two member variables. But in the second case, it is directly showing these two values, because now after the addition, we have not modified the original content of the original objects. So still the values of GPS2 is remained same. So it has not impacted the GPS2 object. It has just impacted the GPS1 object, and that's the purpose of this plus overloaded operator. So we saw how we can overload this plus operator. Similarly, we can overload the minus operator. I'll create here another function. Now to overload the minus operator, you have to specify this operator name here, that is minus, and you have to create the prototype for the same here. And here let's duplicate this code here. And what we want to do is, here we want to subtract the GPS1 from the GPS2. So the members of GPS1 from the GPS2. So when you're doing here in the this overloaded operator function, then the first parameter must always be this, because we want to subtract the GPS2 from the GPS1. So that's the reason, and since we are calling this uh, GPS1 minus GPS2, so this is, as we discussed, this is going to be expanded as a GPS1, and the name of that function, and then parameter that we are passing inside this function is the second object GPS2. So now this operator function here, this negative operator function here is a called for this GPS1 object. So it's a member of this GPS1 object, and that's the reason we must specify this member variable here, and then the here we must specify the member variable for this past object, that is the GPS2, and then rest of this functionality will remain same. All right, now let's compile a program and let's run it. Now you can see the original result is stored into this GPS1 object. So the addition, we had added this GPS1 and GPS result to here, and here we had subtracted. So we got the original values that you can verify by looking this line. So we saw how to overload this negative operator or the minus operator. Now this plus and minus are the binary operators. Similarly, we'll write functions, those will overload the increment and the decrement operators. So here, now this increment and decrement operators are the unary operators. So when you are using the unary operator, then you don't have to specify this argument or the second object. So let's write a function that will overload this increment operator here. So to specify the name as a plus plus. Now this becomes a pre-increment operator. Similarly, we can write an overloaded function for the post-increment operator, and that we'll see later on. But now this plus plus here indicates the pre-increment operator overloading. Now how to overload the pre-increment operator? Here when you perform this thing, GPS plus plus 1, so where we want to increment the member variables present in this object GPS1, right? So that's why we're writing this GPS1 plus plus. So in short, we want to, where our purpose is to increment this to member variables, and here for that purpose this is the shorthand method we are writing. So name of that object and then this plus plus operator. As we know, we cannot directly add this statement without the this operator overloaded function here. But since our purpose is to perform this to increment operations on this objects directly, we are writing the statement here, and then we are overloading this plus plus operator here to achieve our purpose. Now here you don't have to specify the second object, because as we discussed now, it is a unary operator. So only what we want to increment is the content or the member of the GPS1 object, and not from the GPS2 object. So we don't have to specify the objects, or we don't have to specify the argument for the second object. And here uh, this is not required, temporary object is not required. And now we can directly perform the display increment operation here on both the longitude and latitude member variables. Now these two member variables belongs to a this object GPS1, because we are invoking this operator function for this GPS1 object, and then the return value must be this class of name. The reason is, you'll understand now, in this case we don't have to return any value because we are not assigning this statement to any other object. That's why you don't have to return the value. So here you can specify the return type as a void. And now let's run the program. So I'm getting one error here. Let's see what is the error. No. So we have to specify the prototype for this function that we are missing here. Alright, now let's try again. Alright, now this is not a post increment. So as we discussed, this is now pre-increment operator. This is not a post increment. So we are overloading for the pre-increment. So you have to specify this plus plus signs before the name of that object. We print this. Now if I try to print the value of this GPS1 object or the member of GPS1 object, now you can see the output here. Now these two values are the incremented values. So earlier it was 10.34, now incremented by 1, so it became a 11.34. So as you can see here, we saw how this pre-increment operator can be overloaded. Now if you want to assign this result of this pre-increment operator to another object, say if you want to assign the result to a GPS2 object, then you have to return some value from this function. So what should be the return value? Now this return value should be this pointer to this. Now what does it means? That means we are returning an object that generates this call. So here now this GPS1 is generating the call to this member function, and what we are returning here is this objects basically. So now the GPS2 will point to the GPS1 object when you write the statement here. And if you now compile the program and run it, so you have to modify the prototype here. So if you run the program, it should work fine. So I hope now you have understood how to overload this plus plus operator. Similarly, you can overload this decrement operator. So you have to just copy this code here and insert this plus plus. And instead of this plus plus, you have to specify this minus minus operators. And similarly here as well. So this is how the increment and decrement operators can be overloaded. But these are the pre-increment and post-increment operators. Similarly, you can overload the post-increment and the post-increment operators. But now for that, the syntax is a little bit different. If you just go back and understand how we can overload the prefix, the pre-increment and the post-increment, or pre-decrement and the post-decrement operators. So for postfix increment, that is a post increment, you have to specify this extra parameter here. So after this plus plus signs, you have to specify the extra argument, and now that is dummy argument actually. So this integer x, this x variable is not used, but you have to specify this dummy argument. So now compiler will understand or it will be able to distinguish between the post increment or the pre increment operator overloading. Similarly, for the decrement, you have to specify this extra argument or the extra dummy argument in this operator member function, and that's how the compiler will able to distinguish between the post increment and the pre increment or decrement member operator functions. So in this case, what we mean to say is, if you specify this int x, then now this will become a post increment operator. So you can just specify this plus plus signs after the member variable name. So we saw all this overloading of all the four operators using the example. And one more point to remember here is, basically the purpose of this operator overloading is to replicate the same functionality. So that means if you are overloading this increment operator, ideally you should perform the increment operations inside this functions, but you are allowed to perform any other operations. So you can perform the additional operations instead of the increment operations or any other operations, but that will just defeat the purpose of this operator overload functions. So just it is recommended to stick to the basic operation that you want to achieve. So if you want to achieve the plus plus or the pre-increment or post-increment operations, then you should perform here the pre-increment or post-increment operations and not others. So this is how the operator overloading can be achieved. And finally, few points about the operator overloadings. There are certain restrictions applied on the operator overloading. First, you cannot alter the precedence of an operator in the operator overloading member function. You cannot change that precedence. You cannot change the number of operators that an operator takes. So based on the type of operator overloading member function, you cannot change the number of operators that operator takes. The third, operator function cannot have default arguments. You cannot specify the default arguments, which we talked in our previous lectures in the operator overloaded functions. And then these operators cannot be overloaded. So these are the conditional operators which cannot be overloaded in the C++ programming. And except for the equal to operator functions are inherited by any derived class. So this is useful in case of inheritance. So except this operator, all the other operators are inherited by the derived class. However, a derived class is free to overload any operator, including those overloaded by the base class, which chose relative to itself. So apart from the operators that are overloaded by base class, derived class is free to overload any operator. So these are the few restrictions applied to the operator overloadings. So I think we discussed most of the points related with this operator overloading. I hope you have understood the concepts of this operator overloading. So for now, thanks for watching this video and stay tuned for the upcoming videos.